Hello, everyone. It's Robin, and I am thrilled to be here to talk now about stress cycles, and stress regulation. Now, as caregivers, I know you know all about stress, and I don't want to spend too much time here, but I do want to talk about stress in a little bit of a different way as a position of being able to think about how do we stress wisely. I do believe there is a way to stress wisely, and I'm going to share with you how we came upon this. Now, a lot of the ideas that we're going to talk about are actually informed by the amazing Dr. Kelly McGonigal. Now, she wrote a book called The Upside of Stress, and she really unpacked thinking about stress in a way that can serve us and how we can use stress to our advantage. So that book is a great resource if you want to dive deeper. But I give you a wee bit of an overview. The way we're going to talk about stress today is understanding that stress is a biological reaction. Stress is actually a chemical reaction to help motivate our behavior. It lets us know what matters. It lets us know what's expected of us or what we need to focus on. So if you think about your stress from a biological perspective, your stress is actually a hormone called cortisol, and it goes into your bloodstream and it's going to impact your behavior. Now, the way that I find it really helpful to think about this biology and stress reaction is actually to use this bell curve here. And I promise there's only one bell curve I'm going to show you, but this is the Yerkes-Dodson human performance stress curve. And this isn't new. It's been around since like 1908, but I think this really helps us understand stress in a way that we can think about it as a wise practice. Now, if you look at this diagram, what we're seeing here is that if you didn't have any cortisol in your bloodstream, right? If you weren't having that adrenaline or that responsibility or that accountability or those tasks being asked of you, we actually know that you would be pretty bored. Like you wouldn't have anything to kind of fire you up and get you going. But as pressure starts to rise and people are counting on you, or there's deadlines or responsibilities, or you're navigating the many things that are on your plate, as that starts to develop, what we start to see is your body's going to release more cortisol, and it's actually going to improve your performance. It's going to give you better clarity. It's going to give you better focus. It's going to actually give you energy so that way you can face the task at hand. Now, it's interesting. We call this the zone of optimal performance. When you have the right amount of stress in your blood, you get things done. It gives you that like drive to be able to meet the needs. Now, what's interesting is we also call this your A game. This is when you're feeling really dialed in. Now, things can still be complicated and messy and challenging, but you're feeling really in charge. You have what we call good efficacy or confidence that you can navigate your current landscape. You can stick handle a lot of competing demands. Now, unfortunately, what we do see when we use this work is that if the stress levels just keep rising, meaning that cortisol just gets more and more in your bloodstream, which is provoked by more stressors, more pressure, more deadlines, more seasons of great uncertainty like what we're facing right now. We don't just keep getting better and better and better at our jobs. We'll actually cross over this threshold where all of a sudden we start to be negatively impacted by the stress. We start to see fatigue and exhaustion. We worry about people's health. We also run the risk of burnout. This is when you have nothing left in your tank whatsoever. And why I worry about persons is that people are getting stuck here. People are spending a lot of time in this distress, and it's eroding their sense of self. When you're here for a long time, you don't feel like yourself. You lose interest in things that matter most to you. You start to see a decrease in compassion. You see a decrease in empathy. We see deep compassion fatigue. We see people who are bone tired. They're exhausted. This is not a place where we want to stay. But thankfully, based on Dr. McGonigal's work, we know we can get you out of here. We can get you unstuck, so to speak. Now, there's three key ways that if you've noticed that, yes, Robin, I'm feeling pretty stuck here, there's three ways we can get you out. Number one is to be in motion. Now, I appreciate when you're exhausted, the last thing you want to think about is going for a walk or stretching. But what the research demonstrates is that mobility, that movement is absolutely crucial to help your body start to break down the cortisol. Now, what I see in our culture is we have a very fractured relationship with exercise. I see people use it as a form of self-punishment. I see people use it for social comparison. I even see people use it for food correction. That's not the idea of movement. You cannot hate yourself healthy. You have to think about practices that are gentle, that are actually going to reduce the stress. So we know that walking is the most effective way to consistently burn off that cortisol. It's going to help you feel better on a very deep level. Now, the second way our bodies can get rid of that cortisol very quickly is through crying. And it's a very particular cry. It's this like red blotchy cry where you get like all slobbery. It is a glorious way of recalibrating your system. But again, in our culture, we view crying as weakness, where actually it's science. It's our body's way of recalibrating. So that's not misbehavior. If you find that you're drawn to tears, that's stress behavior. That tells you there's so much going on inside. Your body's trying to find a way to get it out. So again, embracing the fact that our bodies know how to heal themselves. They know what we need. So listening to that voice. Now, the third and the final way that we can get rid of built up cortisol very quickly is by eating carbohydrates. We eat all those delicious things and they soothe us on two levels. So it explains why at the end of the day or in stressful scenarios, some people are so drawn to those cookies or crackers, or you just want to curl up with white bread. It's because cortisol is metabolized with carbohydrates. The carbohydrates break it down. We also know that eating is a soothing process. And in our culture, oh my gosh, we are just riddled with diet rules and diet culture and things about what we should eat and not to eat and when not to eat. The reality is that our body needs nutrition and that we eat for more than just physical reasons. Sometimes we eat as a way of stress reduction. And what's interesting is that when we start to explore ways of nurturing our body, healing that relationship with our bodies, with eating and stress relationships, what we start to see is that we can get things back into a balanced state. And there's a lot of research that talks about this. Now, we also know that things like dark chocolate are a pretty effective way of breaking down some of that cortisol. So there's no judgment here. Understand that your body is showing you data. Your body is letting you know what it needs, and your body can heal itself. It knows what it needs in that moment. So trusting that. Now, the real craft when we think about stress cycling is to understand what our triggers are. What is it that pushes you from stress, where we want you to be because you get the good work done, over into distress, where all of a sudden it starts to take a toll on you, where your relationships will start to erode, or you don't feel like yourself anymore. Now, each and every one of us have little behaviors that serve as tells that we've started to cross that threshold. Some people start to make errors, right? They stop. Maybe you also notice it's hard to get started. Maybe you do self-rejecting, right? You discount your good ideas before you even give them the light of day. Or maybe, I know myself, I start to forget things. I'll walk into a room and can't remember why I walked in here because I have way too much going on in my short-term memory. Or maybe you start to find that you just have that compassion fatigue where you're just like, you're done caring. Like you just can't care anymore. And we seek different strategies of just pulling away. Now, when you start to know what your tells are and you start to recognize the patterns in your behavior, early detection will be extremely important because it's a lot easier to pull ourselves out when we're just a few steps into distress versus when we've surrendered to distress and we're deeply embedded. Now, what we think about here and the ultimate goal and the key is what we call emotional regulation. We know you're going to have stressful days. We know things are going to trigger you. We know you have exposure points. But what we want to think about is how do we work with those in a way that's going to serve us, that's going to help us be the caregivers that we want to be to the people who matter most to us. So we can lean into Gilbert's research here because it shines light on this idea that we call emotional regulation. And what we're seeing here and what Gilbert talks about is that we have three circles, so to speak. Now, the first circle is your drive system. This is what fires you up. This is what gets the good work done. It's task, focus. It's just how we deliver. That's our drive system. That's part of our brain's way of getting things done. Now, the other system that we use is what's called our threat system. Now, for some of us, this has been going on since COVID started. It hasn't, that fire alarm in our head and our heart hasn't gone off since last March 2020. Now, we can't always have an activated nervous system. That's going to start to erode our sense of peace. It's okay that it goes off and lets us know about danger, but we just can't leave that fire alarm unattended. And a lot of folks have. It just has been this open nerve where we feel so wobbly and so unsteady, which then impacts our capacity to look after ourselves as well as the people we love. So thankfully, the antidote to find a balance within those two competing systems is by using our soothing system. Now, your soothing system is we come pre-wired with this in our biology that says we are going to be okay, that we can quiet the mental chatter. We can quiet that threat system. Now, the easiest way to activate your soothing system, and this system is always readily available to you, is through your breath. That deep inhalation in, and that nice, slow, deep exhalation out is enough to recalibrate your system. 3 breaths is enough to send the cues to your brain that you are safe. All will be well. We're going to find a way through it. Now, if you like activities to help remind you about breath work, my favorite one that I've come upon and colleagues have shared with me is called birthday cake breathing. Now, there are so many different ones. I encourage you to explore some breath work because there's some really amazing ways to regulate, but birthday cake breathing is my favorite. Let me tell you how this one works. You take a deep inhalation in, and then you slowly blow out, imagine blowing out your birthday candles. So visualize your birthday cake and then deep inhale in, and then slowly blow out your birthday candles. Now, I can let you know, full disclosure, I am a mother of 3 teenagers, and my youngest teenager recently came in and I was birthday cake breathing. I had noticed that I was carrying a lot of tension in my upper body. I was fretting. I just was feeling out of sorts. So I paused and I thought, okay, I'm going to do some birthday cake breath. So I was doing my birthday cake breathing as Jax walked in. And Jax started to, first of all, he recognized it. He's like, "Oh, Mama, your birthday cake breathing." And I said, "Yes, Jax, I'm feeling a wee bit worked up." And then he started to laugh. And I said, "Jax, what are you laughing at?" He's like, "Mama," he's like, "you just have so many candles on that birthday cake of yours." And then he said, "You have like legitimately no chill, do you?" And you know what? I don't think truer words were said that day. I had somehow lost my chill. So when we think about this practice of emotional regulation, it is just that. They're practices. We don't need to be perfect. We don't have to do this like in such a regimented way that it's just another thing that we're not doing well enough. Emotional regulation means that we identify when we're triggered, we identify when the emotions are getting big, and we address them promptly. So again, you don't have to be perfect. You just need to be present. And when we start to tap into that mindfulness practice of being aware of our emotions, how we're feeling, we're pulling ourselves out of autopilot. And one of the variables that I see so often working with caregivers, especially caregivers working with vulnerable populations, is that we've had to go on autopilot. For some of us, it's coping. For others, it's just the pace that's required of us to be able to be of service to the people that count on us. Autopilot means we go through the motions. We have become so actually masterful at our life that we can just almost do it with our eyes closed. We don't even have to like think through it. But when we're in that zone of autopiloting, we're also missing moments. We're missing those little moments, perhaps of merriment. We're missing those little moments where we're actually seeing the person that we're supporting. We get so tied into the protocol and the practice and just going through those routines, we sometimes miss out. And sometimes protecting our peace means we have to do that. So there's no judgment. If you say, "Robyne, I've been on autopilot for a long time," there's no judgment here. There's no place for shame. Shame will not bring healing. Shame will not bring resiliency. But what I do want you to think about is that taking the time to slow down, to take an inventory of how things are going, knowing that you are worth stress regulation. You are worth it if people are counting on you. And this isn't selfish to slow down and understand your stress responses. This is science. If you want to be of service to your family system, we need to make sure that you are okay. You deserve to feel well. You deserve to be well. So thank you for joining me. I'm excited to talk about our next series. I will see you promptly. Bye for now.